Code 4. The warrior gains mastery over their mind. The warrior cannot know their enemy if they do not know themselves. The warrior understands that the battle is fought in their inner world, and the battlefield is the field of their mind. Already I've had such an interesting interaction with this particular point of truth. I had a friend who's outside of our particular faith, who read one of the early manuscripts of the book, and they told me when they finally got to page 80, when I talked about the spaces in between the rain, that they broke out and began to weep. I think the reality is that there's a resonance here that far too many of us have, that we have far too often tried to ignore and haven't admitted. I think all of us have found ourselves at times at battles with our inner world, with our thought life, with our imagination, with our memories, with those strange places that we travel within us that haunt us and sometimes seem to pull us into a life we've run from. I know for myself, the longer I live my life, the more I realize I do not remember my history. I remember my memories. I've forgotten most of my life, and in a curious way, if we ever worried about being forgotten, the reality is not only would other people forget us, but we forget ourselves. We forget most of our lives. I imagine that 99.9% of my life, I do not have any conscious memory of. But what I remember are the experiences or my reaction to those experiences that have shaped my life. I find myself traveling back to the same memories over and over and over again. And those memories become the material from which we create our futures. We need to be careful because in a very dangerous way, we are all time travelers, and we do travel back in time. We so often travel back to those moments in our life we wish had never happened. We travel back to those moments that caused us our greatest pain, that brought us our deepest woundings, those memories in our life that we would not wish on anyone. And why is it that it's so difficult to remember all the endless good memories in our life and so difficult to forget all the most painful moments of our life? When I was around 15 years old, we were moving from Miami, Florida to Raleigh, North Carolina, and I knew I had an opportunity to recreate myself. If you've ever had just a desire to start over again, to almost reinvent yourself, I knew that was the kind of moment I had. I was in the middle of high school and I didn't want to be who I was. I didn't want to be who I'd been. And so I thought, here, I have a chance. No one knows me. No one knows any of my story. Nobody knows my background. Nobody knows my history. So I can start with a blank slate. And the miles we drove from Miami to Raleigh were, for me, not just a distance of miles, but a distance of time and almost dimensions. I took time to reinvent myself. I began to ask myself, who do I want to become? Who do I want to be known as? Who do I want to be as a person? And I made some changes, not only in my inner world, but even in my outer world. It's interesting to me that as I chose to change the way I approached life, I decided to live a life that was more courageous. I was tired of living in fear. I decided to live a life that was more aware of the importance of every moment. I was tired of wasting my life away. I felt so profoundly insignificant, so I decided to start acting like my life was significant. I lived my life in fear of everything, so I decided to live my life as if I was courageous. I felt like I'd been living my life as if I were a victim, so instead I decided to live my life as if I was a hero. And I knew for me at 15, these would be some huge shifts in my life. This is before I was a person of faith. This is before I knew who Jesus was. But I knew that if I didn't make some changes, my life would not be worth living. And I cannot overstate how tormented my inner world was, how I knew my imagination was both my place of escape and my place of captivity. I loved dreaming. I loved imagining. I found so much reprieve in the writing of Isaac Asimov and Robert Heinlein and Andre Norton and Tolkien and Lewis and Bradbury. And these people gave me a gift. They created worlds that I could escape to. They allowed me to travel to other planets, to other dimensions, to other realities, to step into fantasies. And I'm actually really profoundly grateful to these people, because when I couldn't find a reason to wake up in the morning, they gave me a world I could enter into that I did not yet have the courage or the experience or the imagination to create. They gave me a place I could go to where I could imagine myself differently. I could be a different me and live in a different world and have hope for a different future. At that same time, that inner world, that world of my imagination, also became a prison for me. It became a prisoner of my worst experiences and my worst nightmares and my worst memories. And it became a prison of all my fears and doubts. It was, now as I look back on it, it was not just a prison of my past, it was a prison of my future. I didn't just live with a deep sense of depression and despair for what I felt like I'd lost, that I couldn't fully understand. I lived with incredible anxiety and fear for my future, because after all, if this was my past, then what hope would I have for my future? I began learning early on that my mind was a minefield, and it was the first place I had to fight this battle for who I was. That the warrior gains mastery over their mind. That how you see the world is how you find the world, and maybe even more profoundly, how you see the world is how you create the world. Because the world that exists within you is the world you create outside of you. I quickly learned that if you bring fear to the world, then fear is what you're going to find. If you bring despair to the world, then despair is what you're going to find. If you bring anger to the world, then anger is what you're going to find. Have you ever felt as if you had the magnetic ability to pull certain things towards you? Like you feel like you always find good people. Strangely enough, you find good people when you are good people. You ever feel like I always find great friends. You find great friends when you are a great friend. If you're a person who always finds hope in the world or love in the world, let me tell you, the reason you're always finding hope and love in the world is because you're always bringing hope and love to the world. But the contrary can be true just as well. Look, if you're always around people who are cynical, I'm telling you, it's because you're cynical. If you're always finding people who are complaining, I'm telling you, it's because you're always complaining. If you only find people who are angry at the world, it is because you're angry at the world. If all around you is violence, it's because there's violence inside of you. Your mind becomes the construct through which you see reality. And strangely enough, it becomes the reality that your mind sees. The warrior understands that the enemy is not out there, the enemy is in here. And you have to look in the mirror to see the enemy that you must conquer. Your first battle is with you. And this is your greatest battle, and it's your most dangerous one. You know why? Because no one knows you better than you. Can you imagine fighting an opponent who already knew your every move? Going against an opponent that could predict everything you were going to do? I mean, would it seem unfair if every strategy you had, your opponent already had a counter strategy because they already predicted your strategy? Let me tell you, that's why you're your worst enemy. Because no one knows you like you. No one knows your patterns like you. No one knows your behavior like you. No one knows your perspective like you. No one knows your mindset like you. So you better look in the mirror and go to war. If you want to stay who you are, then surrender to yourself. But if you want to change, then realize that you need to have a change of mind. It's not incidental that the word repentance means to change your mind. It's a change of thinking. You have to decide that you will not be who you are, that you will be who you're created to become. You have to change your mind. It's interesting that the scriptures also tell us, do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. I always thought it was odd that people would talk about people of faith as if they were conformists. The reality is that without faith, you are destined to be a conformist. Every human being is interconnected through all of our worst behaviors. All of us have made choices that unite us. You know, if you're gonna be a person who lies, or a person who steals, or a person who cheats, or a person who betrays, if you're gonna be a person filled with bitterness, or a person filled with envy, or a person filled with despair, you're actually conforming to the pattern of this world, because that's the conforming behavior. You wanna be rare? You know what's not rare? Hate. Look around you. What's rare is love. You wanna be like everyone else? Then live a life of unforgiveness. You wanna be rare? Forgive. That's what makes you unique. You wanna be like everyone else? Be cynical. Allow despair and depression to mark who you are. You wanna be rare? Be a person filled with hope. It says, do not conform to the pattern of this world. When you choose negative emotions, you actually conform to the pattern of this world. You become like everybody else. When you're transformed by the renewing of your minds, now you see the world from a new perspective. No matter how bad things are, you see the world with hope. No matter how dark the moment is, you see that moment with faith. No matter how painful life may be, no matter how often you've been betrayed, no matter how many people have hurt you, no matter how many times people have let you down, when you bring love to the world, you have a renewing of your mind because you see life from a perspective that a person cannot from the pattern of the world. The warrior understands that the battle is first won in the mind. And when you win the battle of your mind, you're able to bring the fullness of who you are to create a world you could only imagine. We live in a time where there are serious issues with mental health. We are over-medicating ourselves. We are only finding chemical solutions to human problems. And I'm not discounting at all the importance of therapy and even medication at times when you find yourself overwhelmed by life. But what I am saying to you is that that's not enough. You can't stop there. You have to realize that you need to repair that inner world. And what Jesus wants to give you is a new mind, a new way of seeing life. But you can only see life differently from the inside out. I want to be the kind of person that always sees hope, that always sees the light, that always sees the way to love. I want to be the person that when I walk into the room, I give everyone new eyes, new dreams, new vision, where every moment is full of opportunity and possibility. I am absolutely convinced that all around us there's beauty and wonder that would overwhelm us and almost arrest us from experiencing so much goodness. But you might live your life completely blind to the wonder and beauty that God has placed waiting for you to absorb and make a part of who you are. The warrior gains mastery of their mind. And once you have mastery over your mind, it's amazing how you can take your imagination and translate that into reality. The world needs the best future that you could, and only you could, imagine as God informs your dreams.